Where did the TLC money really go? For years, viewers of Sister Wives have followed the Brown family through the ups and downs of plural marriage, massive family events, and the everyday struggles of life on camera. We've seen love, heartbreak, and tension unfold across sprawling properties, but one question has always lingered: where did the money from the show actually go? For years, the Browns projected themselves as an intact family group. Everything earned, we heard, went into a group pot, joint costs, joint rewards, joint aspirations, but a set of recently disclosed court papers and insider accounts indicates that this description of financial togetherness was a facade rather than reality. According to sources familiar with the ongoing legal action, a bombshell judgment has just been handed down. The court, in a dramatic move, has ruled against Kody Brown in a decision insiders are labeling as a landmark concerning the family's finances. The stakes are mind-boggling, and they extend far outside the context of reality television drama. What if the reason the Brown family has appeared so dysfunctional off-camera isn't merely personality conflicts, or conflict over plural marriage, or the stress of raising an enormous family? What if it were something much more calculated? A financial fraud that has eluded fans, the media, and even some family members themselves. That is the tale of hidden accounts, accounting moves, and a court ruling that would alter everything we believed we knew about the Browns. In the hour to come, we're going to dissect all the details, from the leaks inside to the witness that flipped the case, to the stunning verdict that may reshape the future of the family. Ahead of time, take a minute to subscribe and enable notifications. You won't want to miss an update, a revelation, or the drama that is still unfolding on a daily basis. Hit that like button too, so this story reaches every Sister Wives fan who deserves the truth. Now, let's begin at the beginning. The roots of this explosive situation started, as many legal experts note, not with a family conflict or a reality television spectacle, but with a formal legal filing. Christine Brown, under years of pent-up stress and warfare, triggered proceedings that would demand an open disclosure of family finances. Her action, which appeared mundane, was the catalyst that touched off the financial inquiry. Her lawyers demanded documentation from the family's main financial vehicle, a business arrangement that for many years had handled the flow of TLC money. But what they initially got was partial. Mortgages were itemized, property taxes were factored in, car payments were reported, but the math didn't balance. Appearance bonuses, discretionary payments for high-rated episodes, and network bonuses were either not reported or hidden. Something wasn't right, and Christine's attorneys were not about to let it slide. A motion to compel was filed, requiring full disclosure of records from Kody Brown and effectively TLC. It was here that the first cracks in the public story started to appear. Subpoenas were issued, money trails were followed, and what was learned painted a picture of intentional hiding, money going directly to Kody Brown, circumventing the communal family accounts altogether. These weren't small sums. These were large amounts, hundreds of thousands of dollars, that had quietly mounted up over years unknown to the other wives and stashed in accounts under Kody's control alone. This disclosure paved the way for the court's unprecedented decision, a judgment that not only tests Kody's leadership, but also casts aspersions on the integrity of reality television profit management. The court filings uncovered something most fans intuited, but few could have conceived. Kody Brown purportedly held several secret accounts that drew significant shares of the TLC payments. These accounts were constructed with care to look like a regular business expense, but in practice, they siphoned money out of the family's communal finances. Former financial planners testified and close family members reported that Kody had almost complete control over these accounts. "We never saw the complete picture. Kody was the gatekeeper," one insider said. "He determined who received what, and sometimes the other wives never knew how much money was being taken in or where the money was going." The lawyers laboriously followed deposits for a few years, tracking transactions of almost $900,000. These weren't one-time or random. There was a systematic pattern of diversion. Luxury purchases, personal vacations, and even some real estate purchases were reportedly paid for using these secret funds. The testimony didn't end at the figures. Staff members, family acquaintances, and even distant relatives gave testimony regarding Kody's fiscal secrecy. One witness observed he would go to extreme lengths to keep things off the books. At times, it felt as if nothing was revealed without his explicit consent. And if you questioned things, you received evasive responses or were ignored altogether. The court was most impressed by the care used in concealing finances. Rather than a mere error or misunderstanding, the transactions implied forethought. Legal experts following the case were in awe, likening the scheme to traditional instances of financial malfeasance or fraud, stressing how odd it was for a family from reality television to be working so clandestinely. Kody Brown's lawyers made the personal effect obvious too. By keeping the finances under wraps, Cody supposedly put his wives at a disadvantage, both legally and emotionally. Without visibility into the complete financial situation, wives couldn't make informed choices regarding property, investments, and home budgets. This became particularly important when significant assets were purchased or sold, frequently leaving other household members surprised. But it wasn't only the secret accounts that drew attention, it was the consistent pattern of deliberate secrecy. Emails, text messages, and internal financial reports all depicted a clear image of secrecy. One document even suggested that Cody intentionally delayed sharing critical financial updates to maintain control over certain high-value transactions. The courtroom reaction to these revelations was intense. Several times, the judge paused to review the documents carefully, visibly taking note of the level of complexity and the apparent intent behind Cody's actions. Court observers later reported that the mood in the courtroom was strained, with whispers circulating through the crowd as more information became known. This phase of the case laid the groundwork for the court's decision to rule against Cody. The record, considered collectively, made it virtually impossible for the judge to wave away allegations of fiscal impropriety. As the trial went on, the court addressed the particular transactions that sent up red flags. Legal analysts described them as not being trivial oversights, but as high-dollar outlays that specifically ran counter to Cody's public declarations regarding the finances of the family. One of the most scrutinized expenditures was a vacation compound worth millions allegedly purchased with money from one of the secret accounts. Publicly, Cody described the purchase as a family investment, but internal documents indicated that the compound was financed primarily through siphoned, off TLC payments. Kody's lawyers contended this deception was a breach of family agreements and the trust of all the wives included. Another aspect being probed was lavish personal expenditure. Cody was said to have used the secret funds to pay for Las Vegas holidays, high-end dining, and even chartered flights. Text messages presented in court showed planning to camouflage these as production costs for the show. This questioned whether the family's reality television earnings were being spent for private gain instead of for family needs. The court also considered high-value presents. Some high-end vehicles and collectibles worth some tens of thousands each were supposedly bought without input from the other wives. In one case, an internal message implied that a purchase was intentionally kept hidden from family members possessing decision, making power over shared funds. Real estate deals were another key component of the puzzle. Properties bought and sold during the period of supposed fiscal wrongdoing were examined for evidence of tampering. Legal insiders remarked that transferring ownership and leveraging shell companies made it hard for other relatives, and even some of the advisors to accurately monitor assets. The intricate network of transactions created a situation in which the other wives were more or less kept in the dark. Testimony in the courtroom also uncovered the personal cost of these backroom deals. A number of witnesses testified to the tension and stress brought on by lack of transparency. One of the wives, openly tearful on cross-examination, said significant family decisions were postponed or botched because they just didn't have ready access to full financial information. The judge kept asking for explanation of how these accounts were set up and how the money flowed. The expert witnesses testified that the trend revealed intentional covering up and not mere innocent bookkeeping mistakes. The more that came out, the more apparent it became that Cody's financial management put everyone else at a disadvantage. This phase of the trial turned the corner. For the first time, the judge and jurors had a coherent, itemized view of the financial juggling that had occurred. It wasn't merely a tale of lost funds. It was a tale of secrecy, control, and repercussions for keeping significant financial decisions from those involved. Inside the courtroom, the mood remained charged as the hearing wore on. Cameras were rolling outside, but inside it was raw, unfiltered emotion. Christine, Janelle, and Meri sat in grouped chairs, quietly watching as their lawyer worked painstakingly through the evidence against Cody. Each of the revelations seemed to increase the energy in the room. The cross-examinations were especially charged. Cody was grilled about the secret accounts and lavish spending. His answers were guarded, sometimes evasive, and occasionally contradictory. One lawyer directly inquired about a big amount of money that went missing from a TLC payment account, and Cody faltered, his voice giving away the pressure of the situation. "You've informed us these monies were set aside for family expenses," the lawyer prompted. "Yet, there are several personal expenditures tagged as busyness or production. How do you respond?" Cody's defense tried to posit the expenditures as expenditures made necessary in order to produce the show. Yet emails and receipts submitted to the court told a different story. Vacations in luxury, shopping excursions of high quality, and even entertainment expenses on a private level that were not related to filming. Maybe more noticeably, however, were the reactions of the wives. Christine's eyes would narrow whenever a suspicious transaction was brought up. Janelle fidgeted in her seat, visibly agitated, as records of lavish spending were described. Meri seemed stoic on the surface, but was said to have whispered to her lawyer regarding the sheer extent of what she perceived as financial manipulation. The judge was instrumental in keeping proceedings under control. At times, the court was filled with gasps and whispers as appalling evidence came to light. The judge cautioned both sides to keep things matter of fact, underscoring the severity of the charges. Perhaps the most intense moment came when the defense argued on behalf of the secret accounts, trying to minimize the importance of such. The judge cut them short briskly, insisting on clarity about each transaction and underscoring that the validity of financial records lay at the heart of the case. This revealed that the judge would not permit speculative reasons to obfuscate the evidence. Furthermore, an expert on finances was brought in to detail how the money had been diverted and why the trend indicated purposeful concealment. The expert's testimony was complex, but the presentation made graphs, charts, and account flow maps allowed everyone in the court to follow. The graphics revealed a distinct path from TLC revenue to accounts for personal spending, with the discrepancy between words and deeds. The courtroom tension was charged by the end of the day. Witnesses called it a blend of shock, incredulity, and expectation. All were aware that the decisions made in the days ahead would significantly alter the family dynamics and affect the public perception of Cody and the sister wives. As the court hearing progressed, the soap opera did not remain contained within the courthouse walls. Social media went ballistic. Sister wives fans and gawkers alike flooded sites such as Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok with responses to the new information coming out in court. Hashtags such as #CodyFraud, #SisterWivesDrama, and #Courtroom Chaos started trending soon after. Short clips recorded excerpts from the courtroom testimony, highlighting Cody's indecisive responses, the wives' reactions, and the stern caution from the judge. These clips went viral, generating debates and fan theories. Some condemned the wives for their alleged financial irresponsibility and deceit, while others commended them for courage in seeking justice. Other fan communities were quick to analyze the case, breaking down screenshots of bank statements, leaked court papers, and timelines of payments from TLC. Memes did appear, some funny and some critical, noting the drastic difference between Cody's television persona on the show and the court evidence. The wives themselves also became active participants in the internet conversation. Viewers couldn't help but admire Christine, Janelle, and Meri, applauding them for their refusal to be silenced. Admiration for their bravery swamped fan sites as rumors of the possible consequences for Robyn started to circulate. Media that report on reality television pounced on the news, spreading the controversy further. News headlines were from sensational to melodramatic, with some highlighting the financial scandal and others, the emotional blow to the family. The combined impact of social media chatter and media coverage made it abundantly clear that this was no run of mill courtroom hearing. It was now a full-fledged public spectacle. In contrast, the wives walked an equally careful tightrope, refraining from direct comments in most public forums, but quietly affirming their allegiance to truth and justice. TLC publicists, sensing the increased scrutiny, issued statements stressing the network's cooperation with the inquiry and keeping their distance from accusations of impropriety. Also unable to look away were the general public, Not privy to the complexity of the family's finances, the drama of secret accounts, accusations of fraud, and family turmoil captured the imagination even outside the fanbase of the program. Viewers were not just fascinated by the scandal, but by the family stakes, the emotional and financial risk to several families who were involved. By night, the hashtag #CodyFraud had millions of engagements, and social media posts were full of fans wondering what might come next. Undefined theories ranged from huge financial sanctions to potential liquidation of the properties that were attached to the income from TLC. Many were waiting anxiously for the judge's final verdict, knowing it could reshape both Kody's public image and the family's future. Within the courtroom, things were serious. The judge, with a reputation for a firm, no-nonsense style, insisted on precision and clarity in each and every statement. The lawyers representing the wives carefully laid out their case, pointing out what they said was Kody's habitual mismanagement of TLC finances and secret accounts. Papers were brought in one by one, exposing discrepancies between what had been said on the show and what the books indicated. Bank statements, bills, and even text messages were put on the table as proof. The wives' lawyers set out to build an unambiguous narrative. Kody had spent money on personal pursuits without seeking the input of his wives, eroding both trust and legal liability. Kody's defense claimed that every financial move was in keeping with a collective family scheme and that any disparities were mistakes or minor administrative oversights. His lawyers touted the intricacy of juggling various households and television contracts, attempting to cast aspersions on the import of the claimed financial missteps. The drama in court heightened during the cross-examinations. Witnesses were summoned, such as financial consultants and ex-workers, some of whom testified regarding odd transactions and unauthorized expenditures. The conflict reached a boiling point when a former accountant uncovered a previously unreported account, implying that tens of thousands of dollars had been diverted without the wives' knowledge. Objections were queried and shot back and forth, each side trying to manage the message. The judge, however, refused to be swayed, cutting through the drama and directing attention to the facts. Moments of silence broke the proceedings as the judge went through the evidence painstakingly, sometimes stopping to ask for clarification from lawyers or witnesses. The trial had an emotional undertone. The wives, though controlled, sometimes exhibited visible frustration, particularly whenever the intricacies of financial manipulations were being read out. Kody, meanwhile, appeared increasingly defensive, attempting to justify every questioned expense while visibly uneasy under scrutiny. Observers noted the strategic brilliance of the wives' team. By presenting a combination of concrete financial evidence and personal testimony, they built a compelling case that gradually cornered Kody's defense. Each report, each witness, and each line of inquiry was crafted to reveal inconsistencies and emphasize responsibility. As the day came to a close, it was obvious that the case was anything but simple. But public perception, already swayed by social media, started turning in favor of the wives. Videotapes of the courtroom revealing Kody's agitated answers and the serene, penetrating questions of the wives' lawyers went viral on the internet, adding pressure and public attention to an already pressure-filled case. Though the courtroom wars waged on, tensions at home were coming to a boil. The trial placed enormous pressure on the family, and behind closed doors, deep rifts long lying in wait were finally exposed. The wives, who stood firmly united in public, were each struggling individually with the pressure, with moments of private doubt and frustration. Christine, who was assertive by nature, demanded openness and accountability, frequently questioning Kody's answers directly. Janelle, the voice of reason, attempted to intervene, calling for calm but maintaining her line against financial mismanagement. Meri seemed more introspective, obviously upset by the breach of trust, but determined that justice would be done. Robyn, on the other hand, was in the firing line both in court and at home, her participation in financial affairs questioned at every turn. Kody's inner circle of close advisors and family friends was also polarized. Others stayed with him, justifying his actions and seeking to present the events as a series of misunderstandings. Others nevertheless started questioning whether or not his decisions were legal and ethical, concerned that ongoing revelations had the potential to ruin the family's public reputation and personal wealth. Inside, private sessions were convened to discuss strategy, at times boiling over into angry debates. These clandestine disputes revealed how individual complaints and long-standing grudges became entangled with legal interests. Family members who had previously kept quiet were now complaining openly, setting a tone of tension and distrust. Social media heightened the family soap opera, with fans analyzing alliances, betrayals, and possible repercussions. Posts and comments analyzed every detail known, spreading rumors and speculation. Kody's image, already compromised, was further tested by public opinion trending ever more in favor of the wives. It was not merely a matter of finances hanging in the balance, but personal bonds as well. Each court hearing, each exposure, and each social media update fueled a fire that threatened to engulf the family's cohesion. The emotional cost was obvious. Sleepless nights, stress, and chronic worry became the norm for all the players concerned, while the chaos reigned supreme. The wives' resolve was clear. They knew that the trial was not so much about money, but about accountability, justice, and safeguarding their families against future abuse. Kody, more and more cornered, not only had to deal with the legal pressure, but also the emotional burden of strained relationships and public embarrassment. As the trial progressed, it was clear that the family soap opera and courtroom drama were inextricably linked, each feeding into the other in ways that would ultimately determine the verdict. The courtroom hummed with excitement as a new piece of evidence was read out, a batch of documents and financial reports that would rock the case to its foundation. The judge, heretofore patient but resolute, scrutinized the evidence intensively, his face expressing mounting alarm. The records documented a series of transactions that were tenuous at best, involving great amounts of money that had been routed through multiple accounts without much explanation. The trail indicated that substantial funds had been siphoned off from available family resources without adequate disclosure. The wives' attorneys claimed that the money decisions were not only unethical but legally questionable, presenting them as part of a broader scheme of mismanagement and dishonesty. Christine, seated confidently with her attorneys, took the opportunity to bring out the inconsistencies. She led the court through each of the suspicious transactions, noting discrepancies in what Kody had previously testified to. Every discovery that was made seemed to carry more weight in the wives' argument, and whispers circulated throughout the courtroom as the audience grasped the magnitude of the economic mistakes. Janelle gave a timeline painstakingly detailing when monies had been transferred, pointing out the effects on domestic spending and long-term planning. Her attention to detail and calm delivery made a strong impression, reinforcing the notion that these actions were deliberate and harmful. Meri's testimony, though emotional, struck a chord with the judge and the jury. She shared the personal consequences of these financial decisions, from unpaid bills to postponed medical care, painting a vivid picture of the tangible effects of the mismanagement. The courtroom fell silent as her testimony rang profoundly, leaving scant room for skepticism regarding the gravity of the matter. Even Robyn, facing rigid questioning, was unable to avoid scrutiny over her involvement in the financial decisions. Cross-examination uncovered gaps in her understanding and contradictions within her testimony, further compromising Kody's case. The air in the room was tense, as each piece of testimony built pressure upon him to be definitive in his responses. Kody, who had previously stood so sure of himself that he could handle the court, started to exhibit wear and tear. His answers were guarded, at times evasive, and the accumulation of evidence began to break down his self-control. Witnesses said that this turning point could very well decide the fate of the trial. On the day's final session, the courtroom hummed with anticipation. Legal pundits and longtime observers of the family guessed that the developing evidence could finally tip the balance in the favor of the wives, which could lead to substantial monetary recompense and public vindication. The next day, the courtroom was charged. Reporters, fans, and legal experts were all on tenterhooks, waiting to see the drama unfold. The session for the day commenced with the presentation of a series of witness statements, one after another, each one infusing the trial with another level of suspense. A former accountant, who was involved in close association with the family's money matters, appeared in court. With calculated accuracy, they detailed discrepancies in Kody's handling of the money. They outlined transactions that had no proper documentation, transfers that avoided regular processes, and suspicious expenses in the category of family necessities that were a serious red flag. The testimony created an image of financial disarray and possible wrongdoing, and the courtroom responded visibly. Gulps, murmurs, and whispers highlighted the seriousness of the revelations. Christine's lawyer used the testimony to maximum effect, pointing out the chronology of suspicious transactions and comparing them with what Cody had testified to under oath in the past. Each of these points was asserted with surgical skill, designed to reveal inconsistencies and create a discernible pattern of mismanagement. Janelle, again in the limelight, also came forward with her own set of evidence, receipts, emails, and internal communication that supported the accountant's assertions. Her delivery was diligent, substantiating the case that the financial decisions had not been open or mutually agreed upon. Witnesses praised her composure, but firm stance, stressing that the wives were prepared, ready, and unified in their cause. Even minor details became critical. Small discrepancies in expense statements, forgotten bank transfers, and personal loans gone unrecorded came to the fore, each one contributing to the growing pressure on Cody. Cumulatively, these revelations portrayed him both as negligent and perhaps willfully deceptive. Robyn's appearance before the stand was under close scrutiny. Her responses were concise, at times hesitant, exposing fissures in the defense's case. The judge, keen and inquisitive, asked sharp questions that exposed contradictions and permitted little ambiguity. There was tension in the air as Robyn battled to explain her words in light of the increasing evidence. By the day's end, the mood in the courtroom had changed. What had initially been a routine hearing now seemed like a crossroads. The evidence submitted not only revealed financial misconduct but also raised fundamental issues regarding trust, honesty, and accountability within the family. Hospitality lawyers outside the courtroom started speculating that the tide had finally turned. The combined testimony and evidence indicated that the judge was inclined to rule against Cody, hinting at possible repercussions that would reach well beyond monetary restitution. Everyone filed out of the courtroom, and whispers abounded in the hallways. This trial was no longer simply about money. It was about justice, integrity, and the revealing of secrets that had been hidden for a long time and could change public opinion on the whole family. The next day, Cody went back to the witness stand, determined to justify his actions. But the mood in the courtroom had changed dramatically. Reporters observed the underlying tension. Even his own lawyers appeared slightly apprehensive, sensing the growing evidence against him. Christine's lawyer started the cross-examination at a steady, unhurried pace, posing questions that would highlight contradictions in Cody's recent comments. Every question was specific, with limited room for evasive maneuvers. Cody's answers, initially so confident and adamant, started wavering under questioning. He tried to explain some of the shady financial moves as family-related expenses, but the evidence on hand contradicted him. Receipts, bank statements, and emails specifically detailed transactions that were not transparent and were not approved by everyone. The gallery in the courtroom sensed the change. What had seemed confident testimony before now looked like a forced defense effort. The lawyer pushed on, dwelling on Cody's familiarity with specific secret accounts and transactions. Cody's pause was noticeable, and the judge scooted forward, indicating interest. It was obvious that the defense tactic of downplaying fault was crumbling before the evidence of unshakable documentation. Janelle's previous testimony was brought up several times. Emails in which Cody authorized large withdrawals without the approval of the other wives were mentioned. The lawyer pointed out the inconsistency between his words and the actual transactions, calling attention to the lack of transparency. At some point, Cody attempted to deflect, accusing others of misinterpretation. But the cross-examination was merciless. Every attempt at shifting the narrative was answered with concrete evidence contradicting his assertions. The crowd could sense the breakdown of a well-crafted defense as the inconsistencies grew more and more hard to ignore. The drama in the courtroom was at its climax when a pivotal piece of information was brought to light, a ledger of more than $900,000 in suspicious expenses. The gasps in the room were audible. Cody's expressions also changed from confidence to clearly apparent concern, and even his attorneys shared nervous glances. The judge, with a firm expression, posed direct questions about specific journal entries, pushing Cody to give clear, cut answers. Every response sounded more evasive than the previous one, further diluting the strength of his defense. Lowering the temperature in the courtroom by the end of the session was no easy task. Cody's defense, which had initially been seen as strong, now seemed weak, leaving him vulnerable to potentially drastic repercussions. Onlookers outside the courtroom assumed that the judge was being shown a strong case for dismissing him, indicating that a momentous ruling was about to be made. After the intense cross-examination, the judge stopped and looked around the courtroom with a calculated gaze. The atmosphere was intensely quiet as everyone waited for her to speak. Her voice was measured but authoritative, reflecting the gravity of the matter. "Mr. Brown," the judge started, "this court has seen a lot of evidence involving financial transactions and expenditures without complete disclosure to parties involved. The behavior patterns described here indicate purposeful mismanagement and possibly misappropriation of funds." Cody fidgeted uncomfortably in his chair, his initial confidence clearly reduced. The courtroom, filled with media and members of the family's support group, responded quietly, some in understanding nodding, others in shocked whispers. The judge went on, stressing the role of each member in a multifamily financial situation. "This court has a serious consideration of the obligation of fiduciary responsibility," she added. "Your efforts to explain the transfers and secret accounts will not excuse the lack of transparency and accountability that these situations call for." Christine, Janelle, and the other wives shared whispered glances, their satisfaction obvious but subdued by the seriousness of the proceedings. They had battled relentlessly to bring to light what they thought was a broad history of financial exploitation, and now their work was being acknowledged at the very top of the courtroom. Cody's lawyer intervened briefly in an effort to soften the effect of the judge's words. However, the judge's reply was not to be swayed. "I will permit counsel to be heard, but do not confuse formal procedural niceties for lack of firmness in dealing with situations that embrace serious financial improprieties." The warning was explicit. Any efforts to conceal the truth or tamper with the result would be subjected to strict judicial examination. The tone established in this hearing portended a verdict that had far-reaching implications for Cody and his business transactions. Beyond the courtroom, analysts called the move unprecedented. Although judges frequently warn parties in civil proceedings, the actual mention of mismanagement and possible misrepresentation was seen as unusually blunt. Most understood it to be a good indication that the court was poised to rule decisively against Cody. Finishing the day, Cody departed the courtroom with a visibly tight-lipped presence. Reporters captured brief looks of worry as he emerged into the waiting throng of media, replying to questions with general reassurances. Meanwhile, the other wives seemed determined, their eyes gleaming in a spirit of vindication. The mood was tense, and rumors of the imminent judgment started making rounds quickly on social media. Everyone knew that the judge's stern admonitions were not just words of rhetoric. They were a threatening precursor to a verdict that had the potential to restructure the financial landscape for the entire family. The next day in court, the spotlight fell on the financial records carefully tabulated by Christine, Janelle, and their attorneys. These records gave a vivid portrait of multi-year transactions, revealing transfers, withdrawals, and spending previously unknown to the rest of the family. The court clerk displayed spreadsheets, bank statements, and invoices, each of which was examined in real time by the judge. The mood was tense, with the press recording every expression. The proof indicated that there was a trend of money getting diverted without agreement, a trend that had placed the other wives in economic danger. Christine's lawyer identified significant transactions indicating amounts that were sent into accounts that were controlled solely by Cody. Such activities, the lawyer maintained, illustrate an unwavering lack of disclosure and indifference to the other family members' financial rights. Janelle rose to address the personal experience of these transactions. "We entrusted him with collective assets, thinking it was for the family," she explained. "But the truth proves our trust was exploited." Cody tried to defend himself, claiming the transfers were for investment and future planning, but the judge remained unmoved, pointing out inconsistencies in the explanations and a lack of backup documentation for a majority of the claims. The judge flipped through the records, occasionally pausing to pose pointed questions. "Mr. Brown," she said, "these entries seem to reflect a conscious evasion of responsibility. How do you explain these actions against the fiduciary duty?" Cody stumbled, reading from memorized lines, as the wives silently nodded at each other. This was the moment that would determine the credibility of both parties. The records, with meticulous detail, left much doubt about the trend in financial mismanagement. Legal experts covering the trial observed the importance of the evidence. In complex financial disputes, The clarity and comprehensiveness of documentation often determine the outcome, and in this case, the scales were heavily tipped against Kody. As the session ended, the judge scheduled the final arguments, signaling that the conclusion of the case was imminent. The burden of the financial evidence would weigh heavily in the final decision, and everyone knew that the verdict could have far-reaching implications for the future of the family. With the trial at its end, the judge summoned Kody to testify once more. The room was hushed, everyone waiting to hear what he would say. This was not just about money. It was about credibility, trust, and accountability within the family. The judge's tone was firm, measured, and unyielding. "Mr. Brown," she began, "you have provided explanations for certain financial decisions, yet there remain significant gaps in your account. Can you clarify why large sums were moved without notifying your wives, particularly funds tied to shared family assets?" Kody fidgeted, his trademark calm fraying. He tried to explain with excuses, suggesting business deductions, investments, and the intricacies of running multiple households. But the judge cut him short, calling attention to the written records. "These transactions," she said, "seem to have been entered into unilaterally and with non-disclosure. Full disclosure is not a choice where there are family finances to manage. What do you have to say to the argument that this is a violation of fiduciary duty?" For the first time, Kody's responses were evasive and conflicting. Witnesses Christine and Janelle watched as he struggled to keep his story straight. The judge pushed harder, asking about specific transactions, dates, and missing paperwork. Each question highlighted additional inconsistencies in Kody's account. The tension in the courtroom was palpable. Even Kody's lawyers had a difficult time giving adequate explanations. Any attempt to explain the money decisions was met with sharp questioning. The judge's questioning cut through at deflective responses, sticking to facts and not emotion. Onlookers in the public gallery whispered to each other. It was apparent the mismanagement and lack of transparency story was building momentum. The evidence supported by the testimony presented a picture of one-sided financial domination that put the other wives at a disadvantage. By the end of this session, Kody's credibility had taken a critical hit. The judge finished by issuing a warning. "I will consider all evidence and testimonies carefully." The ruling would consider both the reported financial activities and the ethical responsibilities involved in overseeing joint family assets. This was the moment when the ultimate ruling would not simply be a matter of numbers. It would be one of accountability, integrity, and setting a standard for financial equity in the family. After days of heated testimony, cross-examinations, and poring over stacks of financial records, the courtroom was hushed in anticipation of the judge's ultimate verdict. The atmosphere was charged. All eyes were on the bench, all ears strained to hear the words, which would decide the fate of this long, stormy trial. The judge's voice dispelled the hush. "Upon consideration of all the evidence submitted, including financial information, testimony from witnesses, and statements of the parties, it is evident that Mr. Kody Brown committed unilateral financial conduct that is a breach of fiduciary responsibility to his wives. The court decides in the plaintiff's favor." Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Kody remained motionless, the gravity of the ruling settling in Christine. Janelle and the other wives looked at each other with vindication, relief, and guarded satisfaction. This was more than a victory in the courtroom. It was a public recognition of the mismanagement and deception that had permeated the family's finances for years. The court instructed Kody to repay said amounts to the impacted wives, with other safeguards to be put in place to ensure future transparency. The judge also suggested supervision to avoid any additional unilateral financial moves that might endanger the common interests of the family. Beyond the courtroom, cameras captured responses that would soon spread throughout social media. Headlines read a shocking defeat for Kody, highlighting the judge's strong stance and the consequences of his financial decisions. Both viewers and critics of the show argued about the implications, theorizing how this decision would impact family life and the future of the Sister Wives series. Although not the outcome Kody had hoped for, the ruling was a turning point for him. It was a strong message that everything done in the shadows without openness and discussion could no longer stand. For the women, it was a feel of justice and a blueprint for going forward with more clarity and fairness. As the family exited the courthouse, there was a sense of tension, relief, and anticipation. The decision would not undo past fights, but it made someone accountable and put a precedent on fairness in the family's finances. This case reminded everyone who was watching that money, trust, and openness are inextricably linked, and even the most intimate family issues can have public repercussions if handled wrongly. The sister-wives saga rolls on, but this decision permanently ingrained in history as a moment of responsibility that would change the family's future forever.